Thump number 2, I think, is either a door banging into a wall or a balloon exploding.
A graph of the recording clearly shows a spike each time the gun is fired.
Distinctly, 8 bullets were fired. If the conspiracists believe there are more than 8 gunshots, then they're going to have to explain the lack of those gunshots being captured on this recording.
There is no doubt in Aiton's mind that Sirhan was the lone assassin, and the CIA had nothing to do with it. Many hypnosis experts question the entire validity of the Manchurian Candidate theory.
I don't think that a trigger that would move someone into hypnotic state where they would commit murder would really work.
The CIA itself apparently reaches the same conclusion. By 1968, after investing millions of dollars, the agency abandons its research into programming a hypnotized assassin, concluding it can never work.
You do not relinquish your will, you do not become a dupe, a patsy, or a mindless automaton, despite some public beliefs that this may be the case.
In 1972, Sidney Gottlieb terminates the agency's research into the biological and chemical control of human behavior, citing its decreasing relevance to clandestine operations. The American public remains oblivious that the CIA's mind control program ever existed. But on June 11, 1975, the Washington Post reports on a civilian scientist who was unwittingly given LSD and jumped from a Manhattan hotel window. No names are mentioned, but the Olsons immediately recognize the story of their father's death 22 years ago. They decide to go public. All the major networks attend, as the Olsons add Frank Olson's name to the list of victims of the CIA. The source for the article describing Frank Olson's death is the Rockefeller Commission report. Triggered by Watergate, it's a presidential inquiry into illicit domestic activities by the CIA. The Olsons decide to sue the agency for their father's wrongful death.
And within 10 days, we were sitting in the Oval Office of the White House getting an apology from Gerald Ford himself.
The family receives $750,000 for Frank Olson's death. Spurred by the media reports, Congress launches its own investigation into the CIA, chaired by Senator Frank Church. Sidney Gottlieb and Robert Lashbrook are summoned to testify.
We had a hypnotist do some experiments, primarily to see what the limitations of hypnosis might be. Can you make a person do something under hypnosis that he would not ordinarily do?
The revelations are staggering. 80 institutions have been contracted by the CIA for mind control research, costing the taxpayer the equivalent of $30 million today. The committee concludes the agency demonstrated a fundamental disregard for the value of human life. Former CIA Director Richard Helms reveals that in 1973, he instructed Sidney Gottlieb to destroy all records pertaining to the mind control experiments. But some managed to escape the shredder.
You can be sure in any government agency there's always an accountant somewhere who has got an extra set of the documents, and the financial records included program descriptions and project proposals.
Among the files released by the agency are several internal memos written immediately after Frank Olson's death. The documents describe the incident at Deep Creek Lodge as a mild experiment using a very small dose of LSD, targeting all but 2 of the men at the meeting. Apparently, no one had an abnormal reaction to the drug. But there's also a memo from CIA consultant Harold Abramson, who saw Olson the following week. According to him, the experiment had in fact been designed specifically to trap Frank Olson. The contradictions plague Eric Olson for many years. He is convinced there was foul play at hand. In his quest for answers, he finally turns to the one man he knows he can trust: his father.
When the backhoe started digging, and it was early June morning, 1994, I thought, yes, finally, we're gonna open this thing up.
Supervising the exhumation is forensics expert Professor James Starrs.
The body was, as I would say, in unusually well-preserved condition.
One thing is immediately apparent.
There were no lacerations evident on his face and head.
This is in direct contrast to the medical report and the story told to the Olsons. There was something else the CIA didn't want the family to see. What is present, but not mentioned in the medical report, is a large bruise above the left eye. But Olson hit the ground feet first and then fell backwards.
Could have been that someone did, as we anticipated initially, cosh him, hit him on the head, rendering him unable to protect himself, and then did the inevitable, threw him out the window.
If true, then Frank Olson was murdered. During his investigation, Eric Olson makes an intriguing discovery. The same year Frank Olson dies, the CIA publishes its first assassination manual.
And that assassination manual specified the ideal way in which you murder somebody, but you make it look like an accident. And the best way, they said, to do this was from a fall from a high window, at least 75 feet. And they said you should stun the subject, that's the verb, stun the subject before dropping them with a blow to the temple above one of the eyes.
The pattern was identical in every respect to what we found and what we interpreted from the remains of Dr. Olson. I think that Frank Olson was intentionally, deliberately, with malice aforethought, thrown out that window.
But investigative reporter John Marks disagrees.
I spent an incredible amount of time researching this question. I never found any evidence at all that Olson was pushed out that window.
I think you have to face the facts here that when you're doing this kind of government illegal, immoral, top-secret work, you have to be prepared to face the consequences, which include disposal of problematic people. Well, what other cover story can you tell besides suicide?
In the fight against communism, the government sacrificed the rights of many individuals.
During the Cold War, it seemed that almost everything was justified, and if you were against it, you weren't patriotic.
In the climate of the Cold War, or in all of human history, the basic motto is war is hell. And you've got to do a lot of bad stuff, and a lot of people die and get hurt. But we justify it because we need to do what we need to do to protect America. This is the bind that we're in as a culture. What can we justify in the name of national security? Can we justify medical atrocities? Apparently.